And welcome into the Tuesday edition of Robby and Rexrode, 1025, 1063 The Game. Robby Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Nick Keyser here with you on this Tuesday morning. Hope everybody's off to a fabulous beginning to their day today. Joe Rexrode, how we doing? What's going on?
Uh, doing great. It's some Champions Classic hoops tonight. So in case people were wondering, so that's always a great doubleheader. Let's see. Uh, Michigan State, Kansas, Duke, Kentucky, also Battle of the Boulevard, Lipscomb, Belmont. So
A lot of stuff going on.
get excited. Get excited.
I mean, the world's biggest college basketball fan is on this program. There's no doubt about that.
Maybe I'm in the upper quadrant probably.
I don't think there's any doubt about that. Keys, what's going on, Keyser? How we doing?
Good morning, fellas. More importantly, Robby, how are you doing after a late night last night?
Well, I tell you, it was late, and then we got overtime, so that was fun. Of all the times to get to overtime, last night was a little bit of a late one, but I'm doing okay. Preds get the point last night, and we had a phenomenal broadcast. Shout out to Jake Lyman, who celebrated his 25th birthday last night. Able now to rent a car. How about that?
Very, very nice for Jake. And it was, I believe his first game on the board by himself.
That is correct. First game on the board. He did an outstanding job. So, really good night. You're on the National Predators Radio Network. Preds get the point in overtime last night, Joe. So, not exactly what they were looking for. Probably played well enough to get 2 points in that game, but they lose 3-2 in overtime to the Colorado Avalanche. Sam Girard, the game winner for Colorado in overtime. It's pretty unfortunate, Joe. I thought the combo of Yossi and Shea probably had their best game together last night. Like, they're pretty good, particularly in the defensive zone. And then Yossi made some great plays offensively. But then it comes down to Brady Shea in overtime, essentially losing his edge and falling down. And then Sam Girard scores on the breakaway. So a game last night where I felt like the Predators probably played well enough to win in that one, and they end up with only 1 point out of 2.
Well, it's the year of former Titans, tormenting them, or even if it's not them, Monday Night Football, Jonnu Smith, whatever,
Yeah.
right? So of course Sam Girard is going to, Sam Girard is going to get the Preds, right? I mean, that's only natural. Is it possible that there's I know we've said this before, but some things that are kind of being worked out here for this team in a good way?
Well, I will say this is 2 games in a row where they've looked like they had a pretty solid clue of what they're doing in the defensive zone, which I don't know that that's happened all year. I don't know that they've had 2 games in a row where they looked like they were in sync together in the defensive zone. So it's still not perfect. Like, you got to, at some point, you got to find a way to consistently generate more than 2 goals a game. And they had plenty of looks to do that last night. So, I mean, by no means have they arrived, but I do think the way that their structure was against Utah was really good. Obviously, I mean, they won 4-0, had a shutout in that game, and I thought, other than Nathan McKinnon just getting loose a couple times, which I don't care how good your defensive zone structure is, that's going to happen from time to time, right. And that did happen a couple of times last night. Other than that, like, I thought they were pretty good with their structure, with their defensive zone. They're not fumbling all over themselves trying to get out of their own zone and get on the breakout anymore. Like, I do think they're starting to fix some things that in the long term is going to lead to better play and some better results. Problem is, you dug yourself a hole where you need those results now. And like last night's a perfect example. Like, I thought for the most part they were better than Colorado. Like, that's a game you need to come away with both of those points. Like, you got to win that game last night. And, UC Stars made some unbelievable saves in the third period. But the bottom line is that second goal that he let up, he's got to stop. Like, it's a one-timer from Rantanen in the right circle. And I get it. It's Mikko Rantanen, but it fooled him. And it's a puck that he had squared up that ends up sneaking in, through the right side of his pad over there. So, yes, I think they're getting better. I think there's a lot more to like the last 2 games than not. But still, you got to find a way to get a result last night, get a win.
Right. Yeah. I mean, every point at this point every point at this point is just a little bit more urgent because of the start. So I get that, but I mean, if you do have some things worked out, if you've got some things that you can rely on, then you would think that you'd be able to, to start kind of climbing your way back. I mean, that's because that's the thing too. I mean, you can't, you can really only lean on all the cliches that people say all the time. They're true in a lot of cases, and it's just, getting a point at Colorado to me still like sounds, that's not bad, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you've gotten 3 out of 4 points against that team, which I still think, I mean, and maybe I'm wrong here, but I still think Colorado could be, a real factor at some point in the West this year too. I don't know. Maybe I'm
no, they're going to be there.
Overrating them.
When McKinnon has basically 2 points per game. McCarr is going. It looks like if McCarr stays healthy this year, he's going to run away with the Norris Trophy. I get it. We're 16 games in or whatever, but the dude is unbelievable. Like he's off to an incredible start. So when you have those two, and then there's Rantanen, who I guess only has 21 points in 16 games, so I guess he's kind of a bum compared to the other two. But when you have those 3 guys playing at the level that they're playing at, they're going to be in there. As bad as their goaltending has been, they're still in it. Like Georgiev is their starter, and he had a .851 save percentage heading into last night. Now, last night he played great. Unfortunately for the Predators, he picked their game to look like he had a pulse in net last night. He made some big saves, but Predators got to find a way to bear down and just convert on some of these chances. Like Forsberg had a couple good looks last night. Sissons ultimately scored, but he had another one in the second period that was just a great play by Marcia. So it was point blank, and you missed the net. And that's just happening too much right now. Like they're not converting on some of the chances that they're getting.
Yeah. Well, maybe getting, getting away is something that they talked about here. So, maybe it'll end up being, a good thing for them to kind of get things in order. Clearly whatever, I still think like at some point, like we're going to hear about some sort of meeting, right? Like, especially if they win, that's what always happens. Like if they rip off a few wins, it'll be like, yeah. And then back on like November 4th, we had this meeting or whatever, but
Ryan O'Reilly individually criticized each member of the team for 2 hours, and they finally got it figured out.
He said, I'm going to pretend I'm you, and now I'm going to scream at you. Okay. How about that?
I'm going to take public accountability for myself and say, I'm the worst. I'm the worst hockey player ever. And then behind closed doors, I'm just going to rip you off. That's what's going to happen. And I'm kind of rooting for that.
That's actually a pretty good idea. I hope that happened. Yeah.
I hope it did too. Now, don't worry though, Joe, because you get the point last night, and now you have Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl in Edmonton coming up on Thursday, and that typically ends well for the Predators. That's good.
Well, at least you've got McDavid back to sort of hopefully detract from Draisaitl, scoring the 6 goals he would have scored on you if McDavid wasn't there, right?
Yeah, just keep the puck away from him a little bit less. Yeah,
exactly. McDavid might take away some of his powers. So, it's actually a good thing that they give McDavid. I mean, at some point they got to beat that team, right?
Well, that's the thing. Like, for whatever reason, beating them at home has just become a tough proposition. They did play well against Edmonton on the road last year, so we'll see if they can do that again.
They get a regulation win against them last year?
They did. Yeah, on the road. So we'll see if they can do that again. But I don't know. Like, I guess McDavid, but particularly Draisaitl, they look at Bridgestone Arena and they're like, this is my favorite place on the earth. I love being here. I'm going to put up 1,000 points in my career here at Bridgestone Arena. So maybe getting them in their own house, they're a little too comfortable out there, Joe.
Maybe it's just Draisaitl, he gets here, he goes into one of those boot shops, buys boots, a couple rooftops, and it's just like he's just unstoppable, Maybe that's the whole key. Get him away from Broadway.
They got any Cracker Barrels in Edmonton? I doubt it. Finds him some down here and just really kind of settles in. That's what I'm saying. Like Barry Trotz, Had he made it to free agency, the pitch would have been, "Hey, man, you come play here, you're going to set the all-time scoring record." I mean, that's just it. That's what it is, man. But he signed a contract, so that's gone at this point with Edmonton. Cool night last night also for the Predators, Joe. David Poile
Yep.
and Shea Weber going into the Hockey Hall of Fame. I got a chance to kind of check out both of their speeches after the game last night. It was really cool. Shea Weber, I think, was up there for 6 minutes, which I think was about 3 minutes longer than I thought he would be. So shout out to Shea for getting up there and going through the 5 to 7 minute timeline. Good stuff from Shea Weber. Really cool stuff from David Poile and his journey last night. But just if you've been a long time Predators fan, last night pretty cool seeing David Poile going in and the first homegrown superstar, the first drafted player by the Predators getting into the Hockey Hall of Fame.
Yeah, pretty awesome. And let's see, what are we talking here? 8 years ago, 8 or even maybe 7 is when he actually came back. But right around there.
Yeah.
I still remember when Shea Weber came back. Someone asked him about David. It might have been you asked him about David Poile, and
it did not go well.
Not super excited to talk about that, but he shouted him out last night, which I think is kind of nice.
It was, and anytime Craig Partner Bog gets a shout out in a Hall of Fame speech, I'm here for it. Good stuff
absolutely.
from Shea Weber there. 615-737-1025, our phone number, 615-737-1025. We'll take your thoughts all show long on our phone and text lines, which are driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. We got a lot to get to on the program today. We're going to get into the Titans. Coming up next, we'll get into a lot of college football on the program today. Tennessee and their race for the college football playoff. Diego Pavia suing the NCAA. We'll have Chris Vanini from The Athletic joining us at 8 o'clock. All that coming up on today's program. Some Titans thoughts that I want to get to in the aftermath of Sunday's game against LA, and a pretty interesting piece from PaulKuharski.com. We'll get into all that coming up next. Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3, The Game. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, broadcasting from our Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership, where the buzz is always about great service. Taking your thoughts on our phone and text lines driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Joe, in the aftermath of the Titans' loss to the Chargers, it drops them to 2-7. And our friend Paul Kuharski, who was on the show with us yesterday and who will have with us tomorrow, took a little bit of a different approach with his column after the game. Instead of just breaking down, the game and the loss, which has become a very common thing this year, kind of went into the state of the Titans. And his general point in his column at paulkuharski.com is you got 2 years, 8 wins to show for it with this current regime right now, at least on the front office side of things. We know that, Brian Callahan has come in and it's his first year, and we'll see basically how that goes for him moving forward here. I want to read just one part of PK's column here and kind of get your reaction to it, because I think it leads into an interesting discussion with the fan base. And it just says this, quote, "Players are not performing well enough. Coaches aren't fixing repeat mistakes. The GM who put the team together is out of the building, or is out building the fantastic relationships we hear about, but he can't be held account for his roster because he's invisible. He answered 5 whole questions 2 weeks ago and set off 2 weeks of criticisms for his inane responses. The owner hasn't taken a meaningful question for anyone who doesn't get a paycheck from her in years. They'll leave Callahan, as they left Mike Vrabel before him, to answer for everything, whether he deserves to or not, whether it's his to speak about or not. It's such a big mess, and there are so few people involved in it to be confident about. Maybe it's a super slow build and patience pays off, but it's hard to have faith in that." That's what Kuharski says in his column. So what's your reaction when you hear that? And as you look at Titans fans, we've had the Carthon Brinker discussion a lot in the last few weeks, and we're going to probably continue to have it a lot as the season goes on here. What's your sense from the fan base on how they view the Carthon Brinker situation, factoring in everything we've talked about with Amy Adams Strunk and the rash decisions that she's made at times over the last couple of years? How do you view kind of the way this whole thing is trending with the front office? We have Rexrode's first mute of the day. He had gone through a stretch where he was doing really well, and the last week or so, it's come back in, Joe. It's creeping back into your game.
Why is that? Why am I having a mute issue? Maybe it's because I was actually looking up to see if there were any Cracker Barrels in Canada for you. The closest to Edmonton is in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. I'd like you to know.
Well,
I've been
a long way.
It is a long way. It's close to Canada. I've been to Coeur d'Alene to get a burger at some place because I was like covering the NCAA tournament in Spokane, Washington. It seems like a nice place for a Cracker Barrel, but unfortunately, Canada has not yet embraced the Cracker Barrel. Wow. There's my little update for you.
No wonder Leon Draisaitl loves it here.
Exactly. Yeah, I'd love to know the answer to your question. Look, the more you lose, it's naturally the more like a fan base is going to be disillusioned. And again, there's just so many. It's the losing, it's the changing, it's the ownership, and all of the just. Here's a really important decision, and it's this. Oh no! I'm going to switch right now, and actually, I'm going to do this instead. And the product is rough, and of course, you just add in. It really is amazing, like the just flooding of other teams with former Titans who are doing good things for them. I just to add to adds a little insult to injury. So so think of this fan base. It wasn't that long ago that there was a lot of excitement about what was going on in this last off season, and let Rand cook all over the place. And I think I'll speak for myself. I liked some of the things when they happened for sure, understanding that on every offseason move, and in any offseason, there's going to be some that work, some that don't. But I thought I liked some of that, and I like the idea of, look, man, you want to find out about Will Levis, but you also you can't be bad and find out. You need to be as good as possible for him. And obviously in this league, you can't. The super slow build line there by Kuharski. And by the way, a very good piece by Kuharski.
Yep.
But the super slow build thing, that's not the NFL. So all that excitement and some people I think are going to say, okay. And yet I still did not think this team was a serious contender. I still had my doubts that this team was going to get to the playoffs. It is rougher than I thought. I'm just speaking for a potential random Titan fan. It's worse than I thought it would be. Levis is worse than I thought he would be. But I had no illusions that this was going to be some great season. So let's see it play out. I think a lot of people still think that way, but also look, then you have the one end of the spectrum is like Stilly, right? I mean, he represents like fire. I heard him yesterday. It's like he's like, why would Rand not be fired in season? Like he can't even wait until the end of the season anymore to fire.
Have we
Rand.
gone there now? Okay.
Yeah. Well, with the comparison of, and it's a flawed, there's a lot of flaws with like, well, if you did this with John Robinson, then how could you not do this with Rand Carthon? Well, the reason is because you did make all those changes. And so you said, this is what we're doing now. And I mean, it's at some point you probably realize that people are screaming at you for being ridiculous and changing your mind all the time, right? And that would be one reason why it wouldn't happen. But that's the one side, which is like these guys have no, again, just stupid crap that Jared says, like these guys don't know football. It's just, going way overboard. But hey, I don't begrudge fans for questioning what is going on. And the word that Kuharski used, and I can't sit here and I can't confirm this. I don't know it's true. I think it's a word I'd like to explore with him tomorrow when he comes in. But the word mess, is it a mess internally? I don't know. If it is, well, then that's a different conversation. We know the product right now is not good. I still would start at quarterback and say, the guy they picked and the guy they're trying to find out about, they're unfortunately finding out things they don't like.
Yeah.
But that's also not the only problem. I mean, I talked for a long time there, and I go back to the initial answer. I could have said this in a lot fewer words. Like, I'd love to know, I mean, if we could do a true poll of Titans fans, what do you think the breakdown would be?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know. Like, I think the more you watch them play, and by the way, we still got a lot of football left to play, right? Like they're 9 games in. So we got a lot longer of a way to go this year, unfortunately, to watch this whole thing come together. Like I just think the more you watch them play when they're already 2-7 and it's as bad as it's been this year, like one of my questions is, all right, how much of it is apathy? How much of it is anger? And how does that influence the way the fan base kind of responds to this at the end of the year? Because I do think there's a lot of Titans fans that view it like this. It's, oh my goodness, you fired John Robinson in the middle of a season, and then you fired Vrabel shortly after giving both of them contract extensions. Are you really going to turn around and just start doing that again? Like, you're going to fire the general manager and the front office and then have somebody else come in that's on a different timeline as your head coach? Or look, maybe even you think that there's a chance that she fires everybody and fires Brian Callahan along with it. Like, are you really going to do that again and come in and just shake up the apple cart again? Because we don't really want to see that. I do think there are a lot of Titans fans that feel that way. However, I also think there are Titans fans that look at it and say, all right, well, Rand Carthon's been with this team for 2 years, and the record is atrocious during that time. And some of the free agent decisions that he made and or trade decisions this offseason have not worked out and don't look like they're going to work out. And oh, by the way, the quarterback that he was a part of selecting, regardless of how many people want to play revisionist history or act like that wasn't, a part of his decision, it's on his record. The quarterback that he selected ain't looking so hot so far this year. And they don't have confidence that he and or Brinker and that administration are the right people to select the next one. I think that's growing each week. Like, that just my general reaction to seeing, I hesitate to base a lot of things off social media because I think we know how that works. in the world. But even on our show, right? Like I think we have more and more people that are calling and texting in with each passing week that are becoming a little bit more fed up with the front office. That's just my read on it.
Yeah. Well, I said this a couple weeks ago, and we're going to continue. I mean, look, uh, I still, in terms of prediction, I'm still very low on believing that Amy Adams Strunk is going to again start over. I mean, I don't think that's going to happen. But it's not just the losing or the winning and losing on the field. It is individual storylines, and I think L'Jarius Sneed is a big one. Is he ever going to play again? Is Chidobe Awuzie going to play? I mean, like, apparently he's close. You know, like these are some of the couple of the biggest moves, and though they have been obviously just huge disappointments. So it's not just the results; it's also some individual outcomes moving forward that, to me, are going to be really important in this.
I will say, like, people are going to roll their eyes at this because they're 2-7. I do think it's big for Carthon and Brinker that Calvin Ridley all of a sudden is playing well. Like, imagine what we'd be talking about with the free agents if he wasn't. Like, the last 3 games, he's starting to look more like the guy that they brought him in to be. So at least you've got that going for you right now. But if you didn't have that, I mean, we'd be talking about a disaster with some of these things.
Yeah, I mean, a couple weeks ago, it was like, well, Ridley and Sneed. Holy cow. Right? So yeah, Ridley, you're right, is helping. So does Sneed get back out there and look like like the corner that he used to be in this league? I mean, things like that are going to matter too. And draft picks. I mean, as we go through their rookie season, Latham, Sweat. I think Latham's been pretty good. Sweat,
Starting to fade.
just it isn't nearly as impactful as it needs to be. Brownlee continues to be a good player, but yeah. So, but again, like this is, well, I have a point to make on this that that I will wait for.
Okay, we'll get into that coming up next. Take your thoughts as well. How do you view Rand Carthon, Chad Brinker, the Titans front office, and how do you think this is going to end for them at the end of the season? We'll take your thoughts on all that. 615-737-1025. This is Robby and Rexrode, 1025-1063, The Game. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Taking your thoughts on our phone and text lines driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025, our phone number. The YouTube chat is flowing as well. We appreciate everybody's participation. Joe, you had a point that you wanted to make before we went to break there.
Well, of course, I've forgotten it because I've been in the chat and in the not the chat, in the
Text line.
The text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. By the way, thank you. There's been I haven't even been able to get to the YouTube chat yet. What's going on over there?
Oh, we just got a few things. Like the distinguished gentleman says, it's a rebuild. Rand is fine, and the front office is in lockstep. We have to get our quarterback, and then let's evaluate what Rand can put together. He's still cleaning up this mess. Vrabel undermined his boss, and he had to go. J-Rob traded AJ. That's grounds for dismissal. He didn't draft Levis. You can clearly see the difference between J-Rob's picks and Vrabel and J-Rob's picks. I mean, we got to get out of the Rand Carthon didn't draft Levis part of this stuff.
Yeah,
like he drafted Levis.
Yeah, what are we doing here? So see, I got enough here on the text line. Now I got way too much flowing here. Yeah, he didn't draft Levis is ridiculous. Again, I'm not saying, that it was all him at all. Not saying that, but they discussed it and they drafted Levis, and that's this front office, and this is their second year. A few points, on the text line. Well, first of all, what were we talking about at the end? Because I did have a point I really wanted to make, but there's some really good points being made here as well.
I don't remember.
Yeah, all right, it's fine.
There's so much going on right now.
It'll all come back.
By the way, we really appreciate everybody's participation. There's a lot happening right now.
Yeah, the mess thing. Someone said, "Well, of course it's a mess. What are you talking about? Look at," and then citing all the stuff Amy's done. So let's distinguish here, okay? Yes, the Titans, I'll say it for the millionth time, have an ownership problem based on how she has run this franchise in the last few years. She has made it a mess. Ownership is a mess. Agree. Okay. But in the NFL, or take it away from the NFL and pro sports, bad owners make good hires. I mean, like there's so many people here. There's a pretty small pool of people, really, right?
Yeah.
Then you're going to hire. And if you, again, I will tell you now, I do think that Sheila Hamp Ford seems to have a clue, but the Ford family and their ownership of the Detroit Lions has been an all-time just absolute albatross, okay, around the neck of the city of Detroit and state of Michigan. And 3 years ago, hired Dan Campbell, Brad Holmes, and look where they are. And that's another thing, a point that's popular right now, and I get it. I've heard Chase say it yesterday. The Titans need to hire someone who's experienced. This is two rookies. Who's the adult in the room? Again, I apologize for not crediting you texters. The texts are just flying in right now, but I understand that perspective too. But then you go and look at what they did in San Fran, and you go and look at what they did in Los Angeles, and you go and look at what they're doing in Detroit. It's pretty much the model. It's people who have come up, great coordinator, whatever. Campbell wasn't even that, but usually it's that, right? Okay, now it's your time to be a head coach, someone high, director, player personnel, number 2 or number 3 in a front office that's been successful. Now you get your chance to be GM. And that's just, I'm not rejecting. I think it is weird that you basically are done in this league if you fail once as a GM, whereas sometimes coaches can fail multiple times and keep going. But let's not act like this is some outlier, this model of the Titans. I mean, this is mostly what teams do, and there's a lot of examples of it working.
I got one texter that says, if y'all in the fan base can have patience with the front office, let alone Levis, whatever happened on giving people time to succeed? And I understand that. We've talked about that some. There's, I think there's more of, especially at the quarterback position, it's more show me now what you've got, or I'm going in a different direction than probably it's ever been in the history of the National Football League. Now, having said that, I understand that patience can be something that is really important to let a process play out. I also think you don't just give blind patience. You have to show some things in the process of it to earn some of that patience. And have the Titans shown enough of that, whether it's Carthon or Levis, I would argue the answer is probably no at the moment. So I don't think that you just show patience just for the sake of showing patience. Like there's got to be some benchmarks that you're hitting along the way to earn some of that patience.
No doubt. Well, and that's the thing. It's like, I mean, the product is ultimately, and that's what this is, right? It's, I mean, millions of people get to see these teams. And so we all have these public evaluations of the product. And at some point, the product is what dictates the action, right? I mean, that's very simple. I mean, it's just a question right now of, is the product we're seeing, can you explain away some of these things with the previous regime and mistakes made and bad drafts? Yes, you can. Does that explain everything away? No, it doesn't. And then it comes down to, this is where, and frankly, this is where it's a problem. This is what I've said to Jared. Look, Amy Adams Strunk has much more information, not only on these guys when she hired them, but on a daily basis. It's available to her. She owns the freaking team.
Yeah.
So, what kind of handle does she have on like the work that's being done? What are the conversations in there, right? I think that, as if people have pointed out, and it's totally fair, some of the public messaging, I think, is part of the problem here, and is either the lack of it or the choices of what like Rand Carthon and like what he said to Nick Suss got people all mad and stuff like that. And a little bit beyond that to me, because I think that's a little bit overblown, but also like too much, a little bit too much optimism in the preseason, or we hit everybody on the board, or the coaches were all our top choice, stuff like that.
Well,
It's
that's
like,
why it bothers me when people start talking about this as a rebuild, because they did not act like this was a rebuild heading into this year. I'm not saying that they sit there and guaranteed a Super Bowl, but they did not sit here and act like this was a rebuild heading into the year.
yeah, well, and the thing is, there aren't rebuilds, in my opinion. I don't believe in rebuilds. Now, sometimes you have dips where you're just terrible, so I guess that's what it is. But in this league, you better be able to snap your fingers and get to 7-8 wins. You know, I mean, you just like and there's way too many examples of teams that do it. Again, the 10 years ago, it's like this cycle the Titans have every 10 years. 10 years ago, they had 2 terrible seasons, and John Robinson came in, boom, they get to 9 wins. Bob and Mount Juliet said, sounds like you guys want Carthon to stay. Look, I'm just now, I mean, I'm not going to just dismiss the idea that he could be gone. I do feel like firing this front office has to be, it's got to be for more reasons than just they went 5-12 or 4-13 this year. So I'm not saying I want anything. I mean, I want like the Titans to be competent as an organization. It's very hard, given what we've seen from the owner in the last couple of years, to believe that they will at that point. I mean, if she does fire them, let's take this to, like, again, this doesn't matter. Like, you have to do the right thing. And if you think it's bad and it is a mess internally, then you should do that. But think about the league reaction to that.
Yeah, I mean, it would not be good. There's no doubt about that.
It's like, what are you doing? Like, do
Yeah.
you have any idea what you're doing at all after all this excitement about these guys? And
Right. Now,
I
I
mean,
will also say, if it gets to the point where you do feel that way, Amy Adams Strunk, and that it's whatever was sold to you, it's not coming close to fruition, and you feel like there's some level of incompetence there, like, forget what people think. Then you have to make a move at that point, if that's how you feel at the end of it.
you must have, as Stilly would say, the courage to do so.
Yes, you must have the courage to do so. 615-737-1025, our phone number. A lot more of your thoughts to get to on the Titans front office. We'll do that next. Robby and Rexrode, 1025, 1063, the game. This week's Nashville's best deal of the week is Fat Bottom Brewing Company. Enjoy their long-awaited release of their barrel-aged Noel Christmas Ale just in time for the holidays. Get half off a $100 gift card now at thegamenashville.com/deals while supplies last. Robby Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Nick Keezer here with you on this Tuesday morning. Taking your thoughts on the Titans, 615-737-1025. Our phone number, 615-737-1025. And there's, I would say, a lot of different reaction on the text line to the front office, the right direction to proceed as they move forward here. You know, Skyler on the text line says, what are the rules for picking a new NFL team to cheer for? The Titans are so bad at everything that I feel like a bandwagon trying to find a new team. This is from Skyler on the text line. Just hang in there, Skyler. It's going to be okay at some point.
Yeah, but you can switch. I switched to nobody. It helped my life a lot. So I just switched to I don't have a team, but I still really hate the Bears and the Packers. So you know what I mean? That. Yeah. So I mean, that worked for me. I focused on who I hate. So I mean, you can always do that. Okay, just hate. You can continue to hate and make fun of the Colts and their complete bleep show. We got to get to them this week. So my God,
yeah, it's going well for them.
It's really incredible. Josh from Dixon, as a Browns fan, the over-optimistic messaging is never good. We used to do that on dumb coach hires. A lot of what I hear from the Titans sounds like what I hear from Cleveland. Hey, you don't want to be compared to the Browns organization a whole bunch.
Probably not.
It's not ideal. So, yeah, there's a lot. I mean, it's, there's no question that people are upset and should be upset. And I totally understand that. But again, it's kind of like, first of all, I hate the whole, like when John Robinson was here, I hate the whole, why I don't want a first round pick. Look at this guy. He can't, it's like, well, if that is true, then you should fire him, right? Like if you actually think that he can't make a first round pick, then you should fire him. But it's difficult. I mean, the John Robinson part of this is also, you can't deny it, right? Like you can't deny that things went very badly for the last regime in terms of their choices, and that affected the roster. I guess the question is, like, where should they be right now? It gets clouded by quarterback, right? What if Levis was exactly what everyone hoped to? Not like a superstar QB. That's not realistic, but exactly what everybody hoped to be. That he would pick up from last year and be, progressing. What would their record be now? What would the conversation be now? I would bet it'd be different enough that we wouldn't even be considering what we're talking about now.
Probably not, but I mean, that's the guy that
it is reality, right? That's the guy that drafted. Sure, right.
Yeah. So it's like, it's a really difficult spot to be in, because I do think there is some importance to stability in the NFL. We had a texter just bring up the Steelers. Think about this. They had 3 coaches. I want you to think about that. They've had 3 coaches. It's unbelievable, just the amount of stability and consistency and winning that place has done. And they find themselves now at 7-2 with a combination of Justin Fields and Russell Wilson as their quarterback. So some places it just feels like know how to win. And that's certainly one of them in Pittsburgh. I'm not saying that everybody can be that, because obviously everybody can't be that. But I do think there's some importance to getting yourself in a spot as an organization where you're stable at head coach, you're stable in the front office, and you allow them to work. Look at the Ravens. I think the Ravens are a really good example.
That's what I was just going to say. Yep, they're the next example.
I thought the Titans found that, right? I thought that's what it was with John Robinson and Mike Vrabel, and then they get the contract extension, and we all know what's happened since then. I also, you don't just say, okay, we want to be stable, so we're just going to let this thing go for 5 years and see where it goes. It's a really difficult needle to thread, I think. And I keep coming back to this, Joe, because I think it was really important last year, and I think it's important this year. last year when we were talking about Vrabel and whether or not there was a change coming, one of the things we kept bringing up was what was the expectation internally? What were the expectations for Amy Adams Strunk? Yes, you drafted a quarterback. So in some ways you're looking to the future, but you also brought back Tannehill, you brought back Derrick Henry, you brought back Kevin Byard at the time, and you could sell, hey, one last run at being competitive here, and we know what happened. I'd love to know, with the money that was spent this offseason, with the trade of a third round pick to go get L'Jarius Sneed, what was the expectation internally? What was her expectation looking at this team? And if it's way far off from what it was, how does that affect the decision that she makes at the end of the year?
Yeah, and I'm guessing it was. And why you bring that up, by the way, because I agree. I think the Titans had a chance to have a Ravens-like run with those guys, and then even with Vrabel after Robinson was fired. But that obviously didn't happen. And you bring it up, it seemed to me like Mike Vrabel believed he could still win with what he had.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, there's a third-round pick going to a quarterback, and there's a second-round pick going to a quarterback. And that's those are just conflicting messages. And to me, conflicting beliefs within an organization, right? And one side won. And I don't think it was Vrabel's side that won. But, he's gone, so that's what it is. Santa Portland says pretty simple. Rand didn't fix the O-line. And I agree. Like, that is, right tackle. It's amazing. Again, I would think that Bill Callahan looked at this roster, looked at the film, thought he had something that could be decent, and it's just been an absolute train wreck. There's just no way around it, and I agree. That's the quarterback and O-line, right? Are just a problem. Brian says, if a company brought in a CEO for 2 years, the product went downhill, would they keep him and have patience? I don't believe so. So why would a football organization be different? Like I said, the comparison's hard because the sins of the previous regime are still impacting the product. I don't see how you can argue otherwise. How much, then we can get into the minutia of that. But
yeah,
that is why people get jobs, right? That's
sure.
why people get jobs in the NFL, because the product was going downhill before they got there.
Ed says, pulling the plug on the front office in a year and a half. The drafts have been better by far. They need another 2 years, and let's revisit. Have they been better by far? Like, by far? Like,
yeah, I think this last draft, yeah,
was how we looking at that pick right now?
Yeah,
Will Levis was a draft pick. How's that going right now? You drafted Tajay Spears in the third round, and he's fine, but he barely plays. Like, I know he got in the game a lot yesterday or on Sunday, because Tony Pollard got banged up for a little bit. This year, T'Vondre Sweat, how's that going right now? Like, he's had a couple of really good games. I thought the Miami game, he was outstanding, and he's not really done anything since then. Like, I don't know that I would go and say that the drafts are a ton better right now. I think there's still some time to see on that front, but I don't think we can definitively say that yet.
No, I agree. The last draft looks promising, but Ed, I promise you this, Ed, and it's great to have these different perspectives. But I promise you that there's not just going to sit around for 2 years and revisit after that. Okay. I'm sticking with like my timeline, which is, I believe that after this next draft and free agency period, if there's not a team that can win on that field next year and is ready, whatever it looks like at quarterback and other places, offensive line, there's a lot of things to fix. If you got a winning football team next year, then I think you're going to be okay, and you better know early. I think if you get to this point in the season, it looks like this, then I think in-season stuff is very possible. That's what I think will happen, and I have no idea. Someone on the text that says, what about ownership? Can't we say at some point the ownership has to be blamed? Gee, there's a new idea you just introduced. We haven't spent years screaming about ownership.
But the problem is, like, in all seriousness, like, there's nothing you could do about that. Like, right. It's, there's nothing, like, that's not going to change. So right. We could sit here and talk about that. And I think we all see that, right? Like, the ownership has been a huge part of this over the last few years, but that's the one thing that's not going anywhere. Like, she ain't going anywhere. So, like, you have to focus sometimes your attention on the people that are here and that eventually will change at some point.
Yeah, look, you have to. It is a problem, clearly. unless you can convince her to sell, then you just have to hope that she hires people who are good.
Yeah.
And that does happen. And then sometimes it doesn't happen.
Right, exactly. 615-737-1025, our phone number. A couple more thoughts to get to on this front. We will get into the Vols and the college football playoff picture coming up in the next hour as well. A lot of college football in the 7 o'clock hour to get to. All that coming up. Robby and Rexrode, 1025, 1063, the game. Welcome back in. Hour number 2, Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Robby Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Nick Keyser here with you on this Tuesday morning. A lot of participation from you all so far in the program, and we really appreciate that. Keep them coming on our text line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025, our phone number. The YouTube chat is open and is flowing as well, so make sure you take advantage of that. A lot of thoughts on Rand Carthon, Chad Brinker, the front office for the Tennessee Titans, and what the future should look like for the Titans as well as we move forward here. We'll continue that conversation and take more of your thoughts on our phone and text lines driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Joe, this one a very popular reaction for Titans fans that we've seen so far this morning. Did we lose Joe?
Oh, I'm sorry. You said, okay. You said this is a very popular reaction. I thought you were actually about to read a specific. Now,
did I screw you up? I'm sorry.
Yeah. Well, it's my ears screwed me up. My ears, and then going into my brain, and something got lost in the translation.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I think we may have crashed the text line. So hopefully, at least a lot of thoughts on this. But again, so that's my thing. Like the point I was trying to make is, the whole idea of John, like, I don't want John Robinson or whoever to make this first round pick because we blow it anyway. Well, again, if that's what you believe, then fire the person. But I always argued against that sentiment, right? It's like, well, this is your GM. Well, I must say, it does come to mind when you talk about ownership here. So, okay, you want everybody fired. Okay. Then she gets to do this again quickly for you and get right back in there and do another, like interview, not with, she'll sit down with Mike Keith and tell everybody how it's going to be awesome. Now, do you have faith in her? I mean, I guess the question is, do you have faith in her to get it right next time? If this is so bad and it's fireable right now, I would not be optimistic. Now, again, I'm not saying you should be optimistic if she sticks with these guys either, but it's quite I guess we keep coming back to the word mess, don't we?
We do. There's no doubt about that. And look, it's unfortunate we're even having this conversation because, like, if you'd have told me that heading into the year, I'd have said there's no way we're having a conversation about the front office, in their second year based on what they've done to this point. But I mean, it's just 2-7, and a lot of the decisions that you made aren't going well. Like Ed, we talked about the draft with Ed, and he brought up the point where you need another 2 years and revisit. So Skoronski, Latham, Spears, Wiley, Sweat, Brownlee, and Jackson, and yes, Levis, 8 out of 13 picks that are starting and/or significant contributors. Franchise left tackle on Skoronski playing very well. That's not the bar for a good draft. Just because a player is starting doesn't mean that they're a good pick. Like right now, like you can't tell me Will Levis is a good draft pick right now. Now, maybe he figures it out and turns into it at some point, but he's not a good draft pick right now in the second round. Like T'Vondre Sweat, as much as I loved what he did against Miami, he's basically disappeared the last few weeks. That doesn't mean he's a bad player, but he's not contributing at a second round level right now. Peter Skoronski has not been worthy of the number 11 overall pick. I'm sorry. He has not. So, like, I get it. Some of these guys are starting, but to act like some of those are good picks is just not true so far.
Yeah, that's a little bit sunshiny evaluation of that group. Skoronski appears to be overdrafted. Like you said, at this point, Levis, he had a better game Sunday, but at this point, it's not trending toward Will Levis being your long-term starter quarterback, which is what you better be getting in the second, at the very top of the second round. Now that's for the most part. Again, this particular draft, this last one, I think you got more promise and more positivity right at this moment. But I'm with you on Sweat too. It's that is a high pick, and that's a guy that you want to be really making a difference. And I'm not seeing that as nearly as much as they need it to be happening lately.
I got one text that says, I understand you guys have to talk about something, but quite simply, shouldn't any decision be based on improvement over the course of the season? It's a new and different system. It's a halfway point. Sure, right tackle is a problem. Depth is a problem. There are more problems that can be fixed in one offseason. Is the team playing better now than they played in game one? Is Levis playing better now than he played in game one? And what are the answers from now to the end of the season? I mean, is the team playing better now than they played in game one? No. I mean, I am I missing something? I don't think
No.
so.
It's pretty. There's some consistencies with this team that most of them aren't great. So I would say no. I think those questions are all fair.
Right.
I think, and that's again when people get next time they win and you get mad because you want a better draft pick. Remember, these are the conversations that, like, if you own a team that you have, and those are good questions. Is there progress? Can Brian Callahan? I mean, you're also evaluating him separately from the front office too, right?
Right.
Can Brian Callahan keep this team together and get them to execute, prepare, perform, win at all moving forward? Even though everybody pretty much in that building understands that they're not going to sniff the playoffs, So no, I the product week to week is going to be critical for everybody, which is why it's so important they figure out ways to at least win some games and, again, play better and show progress in key areas. Like maybe ever don't, at one point, don't give up a big return. Although I think that's probably a position that's different next year, even if the head coach isn't.
Well, and it would be great to, like, that texter brings up Levis. Is he playing better now than he did in game one? He certainly played better Sunday than he did in game one and at any point this year.
Yep.
Now, is that a sign of progress coming? Is that a one-off? I don't know what the answer to that is, but it would be great for the Titans if that became a talking point in the second half of the season. Like, if he played well enough where you started to say, all right, is he showing progress? Is he making better decisions? Does he look better as the year goes on in Brian Callahan's system? That would be good for the Titans if that's the way this ultimately shakes out. Is it going to shake out that way? I have no idea. And quite frankly, I have my doubts on that.
It'd be good for us too to talk about something different, as we've said. Like, how about something different to talk about? So yeah, but no, I look. I think that if you want to isolate this, that little, like last week, Levis, absolutely better than week one. Like I said, last week's performance by Levis, nothing to write home about. But if it happened earlier in the season, you'd be like, okay, all right, you can see something there. It's just It comes after several bad ones. So
let's go back to our 1025 The Game phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Welcome in Josh in Clarksville. Josh, good morning. Thanks for calling in.
Hey guys, thanks for taking my call. Just wanted to say, as far as like when it comes to switching out the GM and the front office and all that, obviously not the owner, but I know Joe had mentioned earlier about how we don't want to compare ourselves to the Cleveland Browns. I mean, if we're looking at year two with the GM, I mean, are we really trying to be the Browns? Because I know there was about an 6 or 8 year time frame where every 2 years they had new head coach, new GM, and it doesn't give an opportunity for continuity. So I would say that as far as the Titans are concerned, at least do, as far as like with the GM, there needs to be at least a 4-year period. That way you can kind of get a time to get the quarterback, the coach, everyone comfortable with the system and actually have an opportunity to establish an identity before you go talking about cleaning the house.
Yep. Thanks for the call, Josh. Appreciate it. I understand that point. How often does it work that way in the NFL? And what I mean by that is, like, you got to win along the way for it to get to that point, right? Like, if you're 6-11 last year and you end up 4-13 or whatever it's going to be at the end of next year, I got news for you. Regardless of if they move on this year or not, if the Titans aren't way more competitive next year, they will be gone. They will not get 4 years.
I would agree with that. It's funny when we talk about the Browns, by the way, actually they, over a few years, built, to me, one of the best rosters in the NFL.
Yeah.
That's what's wild. And then they made the absolutely fatal mistake with Deshaun Watson, which a lot of other teams were going to make that mistake, just not to the extent that they did with the fully guaranteed deal. And so they're back at just doo-doo brown, right? But like they actually built up a really good roster. So I look, I think that call, I agree in general, the idea of, I mean, to me, it's still wild to think about firing these people yet. Let's go. I understand the comparison's flawed, but if we're just talking product at this exact point for the Detroit Lions with that front office, they were absolutely worse off than this team is in record.
Yep.
And it was like, what are they doing? Now, it was right around this time in that second year, which was 2022, that they went on the long, they started winning all these games, and they got, then had a big celebration because they kept the Packers out of the playoffs, even though they didn't even get in themselves. But regardless, before they went on that win streak, similar conversations happening, right? About Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell. So does this team look poised to do something like that? To me, it does not. But I am saying, timeline wise, rolling. Again, the issue, that's the comparison of timeline and product and record. The difference is that roster, go look at what they had done, right? I mean, and some of it is being bad even earlier and making some good high picks, but the roster was in much, much better shape than this one is, of course, which is why that's now a Super Bowl contender. But I'm just saying, like, it is early. I mean, it is early. And some of the information on this whole thing, it has to be beyond the product. It has to be inside the building.
Well, yes, I hear everything you're saying on the Lions example. What accelerated all that for the Lions? They traded Stafford. They brought in Jared Goff. They got a ton of picks back and made some really good picks. The Titans are giving up picks. Like, they gave up a third rounder to go get L'Jarius Sneed. I mean, there's just not a ton of draft capital that they've got to dig themselves out of that.
Totally fair. Yeah. I mean, look, like right now, what they've done, again, we can talk about, again, I think the last draft was looking like pretty good, but yes, they have not done. And John Robinson did the same thing, of course, right? He had the one, and he ended up getting a bunch of picks out of it, and he got some incredible foundational players with some of those picks. So that's something, and that's where these guys, it is kind of been, it's like one way or the other, pick away, and it's kind of like they're going both ways with it, and you end up with a team that's kind of spinning its wheels.
We'll get more of your thoughts on this on our phone and text lines driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Also get into some college football with Tennessee and the college football playoff. By the way, more college football playoff rankings coming out tonight. All that ahead. Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, broadcasting from our Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership, where the buzz is always about great service. We will get back into the Titans and the front office discussion a little bit later in the program. Chris Vanini from The Athletic will be with us at 8 o'clock. Looking forward to that conversation with him. Joe, Tennessee and Georgia coming up this weekend, and what is going to be a massive game for both Tennessee and certainly Georgia after Georgia loses to Ole Miss over the weekend. The college football playoff rankings, the second edition of those coming out tonight. We'll see where Tennessee ends up in those. I mean, I think I know where they're going to end up. Right now, they're technically first in the SEC. So I think they're going to be one of the top four in projected seeds tonight. I'm interested to see like what their actual ranking is, just not where they fit in the bracket and what that looks like tonight in the college football playoff rankings. But Tennessee at 8-1 is in a good spot. The question is, what happens, Joe, if they lose to Georgia on Saturday, which, by the way, Georgia is an 8.5-point favorite in this game. If Tennessee ends up at 10-2, things could get pretty interesting in the college football playoff discussion. How do you view the Vols, what you've seen from them to this point, and what's kind of on the table for them right now, both with them and the way the picture is filling in around the rest of the college football playoff world at this point?
Well, I know we're going to have our rankings later, but I will tell you that I think Tennessee should be the highest ranked SEC team. Not even like you said, they would be the projected like first place, I guess, so they'd be like a top 4 seed, but I think that they should be the highest ranked SEC team right at this moment. Over Texas because they have a better win than Texas, over Alabama because they beat Alabama. And then, of course, you have Ole Miss and Georgia. Right now, I would have Ole Miss in, with the win over Georgia. And I think Georgia right now, like I would look at this like Georgia's out of the field and Tennessee is the highest ranked SEC team. That's at this very moment. Obviously, they're about to play, and a lot of these things are going to get worked out on the field still. But that's how I would look at it. It just depends on, to me, and I believe this in basketball, and part of this believing this in basketball is going through the selection process. Bad losses are not good, of course, right? You don't want a bad loss. Notre Dame has the worst loss in the country this year.
Yeah,
they lost to Northern Illinois. It's not going to hurt them. If you have wins, good wins count more in the positive than bad losses count badly in the negative, or something like that. You know what I'm saying? Yes. So to me, Tennessee, with that win over Alabama, which does look better and better, that more than offsets the loss to Arkansas at this point. So, again, when it comes down to it in the very end, their strength of schedule is not going to be as good as some of the other SEC teams. It's also like it's better than fake playoff contender Missouri, right now, for example. But I think that right now they're in good shape. It's just a question of, this weekend is just going to make such a difference obviously for both of those teams.
The Texas part of this is really interesting because if you look at their actual resume, like they don't really have a big win, right? Like it doesn't really exist on their schedule. And yet you watch them play, and I think we would all agree that they're pretty darn good. Like I watched Texas play, and they passed the eye test. They just annihilated Florida. And I know Florida was on their third quarterback at that point, so it's a little bit of a different situation. But they just destroyed Florida over the weekend. I think Texas, with Isaiah Bond in there in particular, is an offense that's hard to deal with. And he was back in there, and his speed and everything he brings to the table. Like I think they're really good. Resume-wise, though, like the big time win just isn't really there, and they've got the loss to Georgia. So I'm interested to see how the committee handles that. I saw Josh Pate talking about this yesterday at CBS Sports. Like he's of the belief that there are 5 SEC teams that should be in right now: Tennessee, Texas, Alabama, Ole Miss, and Georgia. He thinks all of them should be in at the moment. And I don't necessarily disagree with that, Joe, but the problem then becomes, like, you look at the Big Ten: Penn State, Ohio State, Indiana, Oregon. I mean, all of a sudden, pretty quickly, you're running out of space in the 12-team playoff.
Right. Like the only way that's possible for all of those to be in is if Notre Dame isn't, because you have to have auto bids for the Big 12, ACC, and Group of Five. So we know that those three teams are like those three auto, and that's the thing, because the ACC and Big 12 have just screwed themselves up this year, right? They're just completely, they have both cost themselves probably an at-large bid. But even with just auto bids, if Notre Dame's in, and right now Notre Dame's absolutely in, then you can't have 5 and 4. It has to be a max of 4 and 4. So that's where it gets real interesting. So, like, again, we'll go into this later, but you know, I have Georgia in my top 12, but they don't make the field because Boise State has to be in, or whoever the Group of Five is going to get its highest ranked team in, and so well, I don't hate it because I just, like,
do you want the 12 best teams in, or do you not? Isn't that what this whole thing was supposed to be about to start?
Well, but what I want is I want an access for conference. I want an access for Group of Five. I want access for Group of Five. Absolutely. I mean, I'm okay with access for Group of Five and the 11 best team. That's what it's going to be some years, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
I'm just saying, like, does any of us believe that Georgia would not just boat race Boise State? And yet here we are having this conversation.
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, so now the comparisons to basketball, we could just have all the SEC and Big Ten teams, and we'll get rid of the auto bids.
I think that's what they're trying to do.
Well, oh my gosh, I almost said a bad word. How crappy would that be?
I'm with you.
It'd be terrible. Come on.
I'm just saying, this whole playoff idea started with wanting to get the best teams in, and now we've shifted to do it. Well, we still want the best teams in, but we got to have the Group of Five have access to. Which one is it? Do you want the best teams, or do you not?
Well,
that's my point.
Yeah, I mean, but so what it is you want the 11 best teams in a Group of Five team, and you hope the Group of Five team is good enough. And look, I don't know, Georgia boat race Boise State, yeah, probably. Like in past versions of Georgia would boat race Boise State. I mean, I don't know. I can watch Boise State in a game this year and see some of these teams in this field and think, yeah, that might be a game. I'm not completely sold that it's going to be like 52-10. We will find out.
You ready for Colorado getting in the college football playoff?
I mean, hey, the entertainment level on that is high. At least you're talking about probably the best player gets into the playoff. I do like that. You have the best player. You might have the best player and the best quarterback in the country on that team. So at least from that perspective, like, I guess it's kind of like more fun than Iowa State, right? But it's still wild to think about. I mean, the Big 12 is just, man, they have really hurt themselves.
Speaking of quarterbacks, Diego Pavia of Vanderbilt suing the NCAA. What do we make of that? And does he have a case? We'll get into that coming up next. Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3, The Game. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. We'll have the Rex Rant with Joe Rexrode coming up here in just a few minutes at 7:45. We'll have Chris Vanini from The Athletic talking all things college football with us at 8 o'clock, so looking forward to that. Taking your thoughts in the meantime, 615-737-1025. Joe, Vanderbilt quarterback Diego Pavia making news this weekend before the game against South Carolina. He is suing the NCAA, and this was, I believe, filed on Friday, alleging that the organization's bylaws that reduce the number of seasons junior college players can compete at Division I schools are unlawful and restrict their ability to earn money off of their name, image, and likeness. He has requested an injunction that would prevent the NCAA from enforcing its bylaws regarding junior college player limits and grant Pavia 2 more seasons of eligibility. So that's what Diego Pavia is looking for. Says the lawsuit says that college transfers that face eligibility restrictions are, quote, not placed on athletes who choose to delay entry to Division I NCAA college to attend prep school, serve in the military, or even to compete professionally in another sport. So that's part of the lawsuit that has been filed. What do you make of this from Diego Pavia? And how do you think this ultimately plays out? Do you think there's a chance that Diego Pavia ends up with 2 more seasons of eligibility here?
Yeah, look, I could never say a lawsuit with the NCAA on the other side and earnings restrictions as a fundamental, thing that's being contested. I would never say there's no chance. It's pretty much been just a romp lately. I mean, that's been like Lions against Titans in the last few years. So I would never say that there's not a chance. I mean, my initial thought on this is, my goodness, think about how fundamentally you're changing things if now JUCO years just don't count towards your college eligibility. That's a pretty significant thing. And the thing is it would be a significant change, and really, I mean, it would impact people, but like Pavia is such a special case, right? Like, not at all really a prospect. I mean, some people liked him as a wrestler coming out of high school. He goes to a military institute, which getting counts, JUCO, and here he is in the SEC. An incredible story. And look, he's not really. I mean, he's not an NFL quarterback prospect. Like Dane Brugler said, look forward to him getting in the All-Star games and getting out there and seeing what he can do and things like that. But the NFL is not clamoring for Diego Pavia to get in there and quarterback a team. He's a tremendous college quarterback, but if you're a tremendous college quarterback in the SEC, you make a heck of a lot of money. And I believe that Diego Pavia this year, not coming in, because as he told me, it was Nevada. He actually had some money from them, and really not much at all from Vanderbilt. But he bet on himself. He bet on, of course, Jerry Kill and Tim Beck came here and joined Clark Lee. And this has been a very financially, I'd say, beneficial year for Diego Pavia, as it should have been. And I have no idea exactly what that means, but you do what he's done, you are going to get rewarded for it. So imagine 2 more years of that if you're him. I mean, that's life. That's life altering stuff. Whereas, again, I just don't know what the NFL situation is. All that said, I don't know. You can make the case that this is just another way that earnings are being restricted by NCAA rules. So I'm not ruling it out. It just, I don't have a problem with, and never have, it's been this way forever, with junior college participation still counting toward your college eligibility. It's just, it comes down to how the court views that as an earnings restrictor. Again, it's not for a lot of kids, it's not going to matter at all. But in his case, it is. It's a huge difference if he could get another year or 2 in the SEC.
No doubt about it. It would be a huge difference. And I'm really interested to see how this goes here, because like you said, I mean, if this goes Pavia's way, this could in some ways like fundamentally change eligibility rules moving forward. Like I saw somebody over the weekend be like, Are people just going to use earning restrictions from now on, and like there's never going to be any more limitations to how long you can stay in college? Like, can Diego Pavia just play quarterback at Vanderbilt for the next 15 years at some point? Is that where we're going in college football? I don't think it ever gets there, but it is like we have seen, Joe, when you use basically, hey, you're restricting my ability to make money off my name, image, and likeness. That has worked out very poorly for the NCAA, that counter argument at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And of course we are. And then you've had also like the COVID year, we're getting out of that. So that's added extra time too. But yeah, look, like Caleb says, Caleb says, why don't you just come out and say you want, he says, hell no, tough luck, buddy. Why don't you just come out and say he's not good enough for the NFL? He just wants more money while he can. Well, again, I mean, what he's doing is smart. This is worth a shot.
I agree.
I mean, and here's the thing, Caleb. Lots of people, again, we've talked about this. There are a lot of people who are going to stay in college at prominent programs, and they're key players for those programs, and they're like 6th-round picks because they're going to get paid more at their college program potentially than they are as a end of the draft pick who doesn't have a guarantee of making the team. So you can say get out of here with this crap if you want, but he says you don't get to magically get good overnight and then say, well, I was restricted back when I was terrible. Get out of here with this crap. I don't know. This is some serious hatred from Caleb. I don't know if you're like a Vol hater of Vandy or what, but he improved. I mean, what do you mean you don't get to magically get good overnight? If you're good and you're doing what he did, then you know, first of all, you should get paid in today's college game. And again, the point is not that he was terrible back then. He's trying. This would fundamentally change junior college. Junior college would just not count.
Yeah.
On your clock. I mean, it doesn't like it's just so different from what I'm used to that it seems weird. And we're going to ask Chris Vanini about this at 8 because he's written about this. But at the same time, when you really step back and think about it, I guess I don't have some huge problem with the idea. You would definitely have some situations with more, 27-year-old college football players. But I mean, that's what the Vols had this year before Keenan Peele got hurt.
Yeah. I mean, there are a few guys on BYU and Utah the other night that were pretty old too. I think they showed somebody that was like 26. I was like, yeah, let's get in there, baby. It's more, let's get some 30-year-olds in college football. Let's go back to our 1025 The Game phone line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com and welcome in Adam in Portland. Adam, good morning. Thanks for calling in.
Hey, Robby, man. So, I got a 15-year-old, right? And he hit like the last 6 to 12 months. He just thinks he's way cooler than me. Never wants to hang out. And last night he's like, "Hey, do you want to play college football?" I was like, "Yeah, dude, let's play." So I got super excited. And I see Vanderbilt. I'm like, I'm going to pick Vanderbilt. I'm going to smoke him with Vanderbilt and impress him. And Pavia wasn't on there, and I played with him. So I wonder if this is like interference somehow. Like if he pulled a Michael Jordan and pulled himself off. But like I scored 3 points with Vanderbilt without Pavia, so they are awful to play with without Pavia. Don't play with them. But I don't know if is there any I don't know how things work. Is there any correlation in the two? Because he is not on that game anymore.
I have no idea. I'll be honest with you. I've not played with Vanderbilt on the game, so I have no idea if he was on there at one point and now he's not. But if that is the case, that's pretty weird. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I know obviously, like again, when Vanderbilt brought in Nate Johnson, that was the big ad, right?
Yeah.
From Utah. And he is right now in line to be the starter next year. But it still would be weird that he wouldn't be on there.
Yep. 615-737-1025, our phone number. We'll have the Rex Rant with Joe Rexrode coming up next. Chris Vanini from The Athletic will join us at 8 o'clock. All that ahead. Robby and Rexrode, 1025, 1063, The Game.
Sometimes he wakes up on the wrong side of the bed. And sometimes he's just, well, Joe.
Awkward moment, let's do it.
This is the Rex Rant, now on Robby and Rexrode.
And I'm going to egg your house. Egg your house.
It is that time of the day, time for the Rex Rant with Joe Rexrode. I think that's Keezer's favorite one to bring back is the egging of the house. Joe Rexrode, the floor is yours.
That was a little aggressive. I remember that day Katie was listening. She's like, "What's wrong with you, man?
I think we need more of it."
You're threatening to egg people's houses in our neighborhood." And I'm like, well, I'm just saying.
In the grand scheme of things, that's really not that bad. It'd be all right.
Exactly. By the way, I don't know if I've ever admitted this publicly, but in 9th grade in my neighborhood, some buddies and we egged my earth science teacher's house. I'm sorry, Miss Knoll. I'm admitting this now.
How dare
you?
So
sorry. Oh boy.
You should be ashamed of yourself.
I know. Well, I'm switching gears, because I'm switching gears. And in fact, we can if Adam's still on the line, we can take him here in this.
We already did.
Adam on Pavia?
Yeah, we took him in the last segment. He was talking about Pavia not being in the video game.
Dude, I got issues. Seriously. This program is just going to be like a chronicling of my complete mental breakdown.
You participated in the conversation.
Yeah. Okay. Well, anyway, thanks for the call, Adam. That's what I meant to say. Good God. But I'm sorry, but there's a lot of people who are angry at Caleb, so I'm just going to summon their energy here. Here's another response from Caleb. Yes, Pavia is getting rewarded for what he's doing now. He wants to change the rule because he can cash in. Now that he's good and in an advantageous situation, he wants free years. That's not how it works. I was denied eligibility by the NCAA for transferring schools, and it restricted my future, but I didn't sue and ask for a handout. LOL, maybe I should. Well, Caleb, Ed O'Bannon, that's probably what a lot of people said about him too, right? When he was like, gosh, this video game has a likeness of me and a bunch of us, and yet we get no money. And gosh, they sure sell my jersey with my number on it in droves, and yet I don't see a penny of it. So you could call that asking for a handout. But, in a lot of situations here, someone asking now if I'm having a stroke. Thank you. But in a lot of situations here, it's because the NCAA has screwed people over for the benefit of a small group of adults who've been collecting all the money. So actually, Caleb, the whole transferring schools and all that stuff, I mean, the problem is, the difference is, of course, that was back before NIL, right? So Pavia is in the era now of that existing, right? I mean, like, this is not going to be a retroactive thing where someone back in the day can do this because they didn't have money, right? But Pavia is in a time of people get paid. So I don't understand your anger. I understand now. Now I get why you're like this, because you had your own experience, but it just was in a different time. I mean, look, if you want to be real, talk to NFL guys from a few decades ago or whatever, pro sport too, right? Talk to college coaches. I mean, I covered a guy who, makes several million a year coaching college basketball. His predecessor, who won a national championship with Magic Johnson, I think made like $40K that year. Yeah. I mean, it's just like, the reality is the money has exploded, and that's when lawsuits come. And again, I don't know if this one will win or should win, but to angrily lash out like that, I just don't understand at all.
Well, by the way, it may not work. Like, I don't,
Right.
I don't know who's going to win. I mean, I have no idea. I'm interested to see how it plays out. Like, but if you're him, doesn't it make all the sense in the world to try this? Like, you recognize what the market is now. He's come into Vanderbilt. He's played extremely well for Vanderbilt. He's created value for himself. And look, the bottom line is a lot of what has been determined so far in terms of limiting name, image, and likeness and the compensation that comes with that. A lot of that to me moving forward, Joe, is still up for interpretation, right? We've talked about that. So in the meantime, while they're still trying to get the ground rules for all this figured out, why not take a shot at this if you're Diego Pavia? I think it makes all the sense in the world from his perspective. It may not work, but I'd be doing the same thing if I was him.
And independent of him, and I agree with you, I'm interested to see if this will work or not. There have been a couple cases in this whole, stretch of NCAA just getting their butts kicked left and right that I was a little bit dubious of. Even the Tennessee one last year, at first I was like, maybe there is something there, right? And and it was just a complete, it's just, okay, here's another opportunity to kick their butt and win more. So independent of Pavia, this is something that probably comes up at some point, right? I mean, it's worth discussing. Is this a thing that, that because look, there are going to be kids. Pavia is an extreme example, of course. He's an extreme example. There are going to be very few examples, I think, like him. But there certainly are kids who sometimes you go to JUCO because you're having academic struggles. You can't get into a school that you want to play for. You're a Division I level recruit, but your grades are not there. That's part of this. Sometimes your grades and test scores. So there's different reasons for JUCO, and then sometimes people have growth spurts. They go to now Pavia didn't. That's not the story here.
Still waiting on that.
Yeah, but some people do, and all of a sudden they go from being a 6'1", 240-pound defensive end to 6'6", 260, and they're a prospect. And so, why can't they have the 4 years of eligibility that you get? It's an interesting case, and it's worth a shot for sure. I'm fascinated to see how it turns out. And I don't understand anybody hating on someone for Diego Pavia this year is cashing in, I hope, extremely well. And he must be having the time of his life too. Why wouldn't you want to continue that?
Does he like mayonnaise? Can we get him involved in some way? He can go Dukes in opposition to Hellman's.
Interesting. Maybe like we could have a point counterpoint and he's mustard. You know what I mean?
Maybe.
There's a lot of possibilities there.
Adam in Portland says, Joe, I've never felt more unseen. This church, I am the Titans of Robby and Rexrode listeners. And you just forgot about him last time out. How about that?
I'm really sorry, Adam. I mean, I do remember like the point made on the call, but for some reason I forgot it was you. And then I looked at the text from Nick and it said, we have Adam in Portland. I'm like, oh, okay. So look, am I stroking out right now? It's possible. I think it's just a minor one.
Great call, Adam. We always appreciate the calls here on the program. 615-737-1025, our phone number. Chris Vanini from The Athletic will join us coming up next. We'll get his thoughts on the Diego Pavia situation, his thoughts on the college football playoff picture. We will get back into the Titans and the front office discussion a little bit later in the program as well. All that ahead. Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3, The Game. Final hour, Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Robbie Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Nick Keyser here with you on this Tuesday morning, talking some college football. And to help us do that, we go to our 102.5 The Game phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. And welcome in Chris Vanini from The Athletic. Chris, good morning. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for taking time to be with us. We really appreciate it. So, Chris, a game of heavy local interest around here coming up on Saturday between Tennessee and Georgia. I want to start on the Georgia perspective. They lose to Ole Miss this past weekend. They've got 2 losses. They've played a heck of a schedule so far. So what do you make of this game in particular for Georgia? Is this an elimination game for the Bulldogs? How do you view what's now in front of Georgia after their second loss?
Yeah, I think it is an elimination game for Georgia. It's hard to see a 3-loss SEC team getting in at this point in the season, just kind of based on what we've seen everywhere else. It's likely Indiana will only be a 1-loss team. Ole Miss is probably, winning out. Auburn, Alabama probably too. So, yeah, I think it is. And, Georgia's it's just not at the level it has been for the last several years. I do think part of that is the schedule. The schedule is a lot tougher this year than it has been for the last couple of years. But also, the offensive line is banged up. It's a lot more leaky than it used to. They're not running the ball as well as a result. Carson Beck is under a lot more pressure as a result, and I think that's what's leading to so many turnovers is he's kind of rushing things. And they don't have the same weapons on the outside. When you lose a Ladd McConkey, you lose a Brock Bowers, that's tough. And watching Ole Miss kind of push them around in the trenches was new. It was a different scene. And so it'll be interesting kind of moving forward how Georgia's able to handle this without that massive talent advantage that they've had for so long. And for Tennessee, obviously, it starts with making sure Nico is healthy and Dylan Sampson as well.
So, Chris, and you wrote about this in your, you rank every week the top 134. I mean, the Big 12, the ACC, obviously, I mean, they have really hurt themselves, in both leagues to the point where it looks like you're talking auto bids with them. Then you got a group of 5. I mean, Notre Dame right now looks good. Notre Dame Army is of high interest in a couple weeks, but it looks like 4 Big 10, 4 SEC. I do wonder, and look, I mean, I wrote Saturday like Indiana is basically a lock. I do wonder if Indiana gets just humiliated at Ohio State, which I don't expect to happen, but if it does happen, and Indiana's sitting there at 11-1, and the 1 ranked team beat them badly, and they, obviously didn't have a great second half against Michigan. Do you think it's possible a 5th SEC, a 2-loss 5th SEC team could edge them out in the end?
Yeah, I don't think Indiana's a lock if they get blown out. If you play at a competitive game, I think you're okay. But it is going to create that problem if you don't have a real marquee win, and they don't. And they haven't beat anybody who's in the top 25, and they don't play them except for Ohio State. That's where, if you're not in the SEC, you really would have liked Georgia to beat Ole Miss last week, give Ole Miss a 3rd loss. And this week, you'd really like Tennessee to beat Georgia, give Georgia a 3rd loss. You want these SEC teams with 2 losses to get to 3. You're going to want Texas to beat Texas A&M in a few weeks if Texas A&M still has 2 losses. Like that's what a lot of it comes down to. You're going to need to hope the SEC starts kind of knocking itself out. While the SEC is not as maybe strong at the very top and doesn't have 1 or 2 elite teams like it used to, the result is you have a bunch of really good teams all around that 7 to 13 type of spot. So yeah, Indiana, not a lock. But the SEC is positioning itself well because it's not eliminating itself, which is what everybody else needs.
So, Chris, Diego Pavia suing the NCAA. We found this out on Friday, and basically looking for 2 more seasons of eligibility after being in junior college. What do you make of that decision by him? Where do you think this could lead? And if this is successful, how do you think that changes college football moving forward?
It's real interesting because it leans on a lot of the same arguments that were made that led to the transfer rule change, which is these NCAA rules. The concept being the NCAA rules are restricting NIL earning potential, so it's an antitrust violation. That they got a temporary injunction on the transfer one, so the transfer rule changed. This one is specific to the junior college rules, saying, hey, somebody can go play pro in another sport and they don't use years of eligibility. Why can't I play football at the school that is not governed by the NCAA, and the NCAA can still set those rules? Don't really know where it's going to go, but the NCAA has been losing these cases in court for a bit now. A lot of people have wondered, when will somebody challenge the essentially 4-year clock of college football? Why should they only be limited to 4 years of playing, or 5 with a redshirt rule? Like, you can go to college for 8 years, like a normal person can do that. You don't, there's not a limit on how many years you go to college. So therefore, if you're a student, why should there be a limit on how long you can play football? That would be the thing that kind of breaks everything open and changes everything we think about eligibility. That hasn't happened yet. That's not what this specific one is about. I don't really know which way it's going to go, but it is an interesting case that, hey, junior colleges are not part of the NCAA. Should the NCAA be able to set limits on that? I don't know, but I know Vanderbilt is hoping for a quick resolution, or at least a quick first ruling, because the portal's opening. And Pavia made the point, like, hey, the portal's opening. I need to know soon because it impacts my ability to negotiate with Vanderbilt or negotiate with other schools if I go in the portal. So we'll see if we get a ruling here in the next couple of weeks.
Thank you for mentioning that people can go to college for 8 years. I feel seen, Chris. I very, very much appreciate that. No, it really is interesting. I mean, that one is wild. The idea of just, hey, why can't I be like a lifetime education, and it just, my career will be like, I'll be Tennessee's quarterback for a decade. Which, I mean, that's to me a bridge too far, but this one is really interesting. While we're on this whole topic with the NCAA, Chris, where do you think now? Obviously, there is a difference in Democratic and Republican control when it comes to this entire question of labor as well. How do you view that moving forward at this point, and where we're headed with that as we head into this next fall when, the revenue sharing begins?
Yeah, I'd expect a lot of the labor organizing stuff to take a step back, because Trump's likely going to not only replace the NLRB, National Labor Relations Board General Counsel, but potentially some members on that. So a lot of those cases that are going to the NLRB may now kind of be viewed differently. Republicans, if they control all three, I guess, both branches of Congress and the presidency, it's going to be a lot less likely to get through a bill with major athlete protections. Ted Cruz is probably going to be someone leading a lot of this stuff. It's still going to need to be a bipartisan bill, most likely, but there'll probably be less athletes' rights stuff involved in that, just because Republicans have typically wanted a more general, smaller, vaguer type of agreement. Whether that means they're not employees, I think it's more likely now that Congress would pass something that they're not employees. I think ultimately this helps the NCAA get to something. I don't know what that thing is, but it's more likely something gets done, and something that's a bit more NCAA friendly on that front. There's other wide-ranging things that could impact schools, like whatever happens to the Department of Education and various things. But as it relates to the NCAA, it'll probably make things a little bit easier for the NCAA to get something out of Congress.
So, Chris, are we going to see Deion Sanders in Colorado in the college football playoff? What do we think?
I mean, they control their path there now. Like that is, they have if they win the rest of their games, they're in. And this team has just gotten so much better as the year has gone on. And, they finished the regular season with Utah, Kansas, Oklahoma State. Don't think any of those are for sure wins, but they can certainly win all of those. And ultimately, as you look at Colorado down the stretch, and if Colorado plays BYU and you compare them, like Colorado's got the two best players on the field. Most times it steps on the field with Shedeur Sanders, with Travis Hunter. And sometimes that's enough to win. So they're what, 7-2 now. And they're in a position now to potentially make the playoff in his second year, which would be wild. And even if they don't, they're clearly so much more improved here. And he really deserves a lot of credit for bringing in a good transfer class, for getting them better in the trenches. Coaches are doing a good job, the new coaches he hired. And this is what you wanted when you hired him.
Yeah, no question. It's I did not see this coming. So, Chris, you have Oregon number 1 in your rankings, as they should be. But do you believe who right now do you think is going to win it? Who do you think is the best team, or the team with the highest ceiling here as we move into the next month?
I think it's Oregon, but I don't feel amazing about it. That's what's interesting is that there's really no team, like we've had for the past decade, whether it was an Alabama or a Georgia, and you're just yeah, this team is clearly so much better than everybody. Yeah, maybe they lost a game, but ultimately these are the 1, 2, or 3 teams I think that have a chance to win the championship. I think it's a pretty big group this year. Texas is good, but not amazing, I don't think. Georgia's not as good as it was. Alabama's flawed. Ohio State is flawed. Oregon is number 1 and undefeated, but they were 1 play away from losing to Ohio State. Penn State is solid, even if they can never win the big one. There's a real big group of teams here, right? And I think that's going to make the playoff a lot of fun. If I had to pick somebody today, I would pick Oregon, but I wouldn't feel amazing about that. And it feels like it's the most wide open the top of the sport has been in a very long time.
No doubt about it. Well, Chris, great stuff as always, man. Really appreciate you taking time to be with us this morning, and enjoy the rest of the season. We'll talk to you soon.
Yep. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Chris Vanini from The Athletic, our guest here on Robby and Rexrode. We'll take your reaction to what Chris had to say. We have our own college football playoff rankings in advance of the rankings tonight. And Joe, as we know, our rankings are better anyway. So we'll have that coming up next here on the program. We will get back into the Titans and the front office discussion later in the program as well. All that coming up. Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3, The Game. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Appreciate Chris Vanini from The Athletic for being with us in the last segment. The second edition of the 12-team college football playoff rankings coming out tonight. But quite frankly, ours are better, and that's what we do here on this program. Joe Rexrode, give me your 12 teams and the way you think things are going to shake out tonight if it was up to Joe Rexrode.
Okay, so here's my 12. This is my top 12, and then I can quickly give you what the bracket would be, because obviously those are two different things. 1, Oregon. I don't think that's controversial. 2, Ohio State. They'd lost a great game at Oregon. They won at Penn State, so that's pretty strong. My third team is Tennessee, and some people are going to immediately jump on me for that. Alabama win, continues to gain value. It's one of the best wins of anybody in the field. I understand the Arkansas loss. I do. But I don't hold that against them nearly as much as I credit them for Alabama. 4, BYU. And, you can make a case for them to be third. Now the committee disrespected them last week, and they just had an incredible, some would say ref-fueled win at Utah, but BYU is unbeaten, and they have 2 wins over top 19 teams last week, and we'll see where those teams are this week that neither lost. So that's just one of the best resumes. My 5 is Indiana, and now we're getting into, they're unbeaten. I put them ahead of 6, Penn State. Both of those teams basically are eye test teams. Neither of them have a huge win, but of course Indiana unbeaten, Penn State with the 1 close loss, Ohio State. Look, there is value in, even though it's like Groundhog Day for Penn State, there is value in like playing Ohio State the way they did and having a chance to win. My 7 is Texas. Again, their wins, their best win is at Vanderbilt. Eye test, they do pass it. You said it earlier, Robby, but that's the reality. Notre Dame is next after that. Notre Dame does have the win at Texas A&M. And they have the bad loss. Again, I'm crediting them more than I'm costing them. Alabama moves into number 9 for me. Then I've got Miami falling all the way to 10. Miami is really interesting. Miami, what's their best win? It's at Louisville, right?
Yep.
Nothing to write home about. But that loss at Georgia State, obviously harmful. Ole Miss comes in 11 for me. And then Georgia is right behind them at 12, having lost that game. So Miami and Georgia plummet. So my my matchups would be 5-12. So the group of 5 does have to have a spot. That's Boise State. So Georgia does not make the playoff, even though they're my number 12. So it's going to be Ohio State, Boise State, 12-5. It's going to be 11 Ole Miss at 6 Indiana. It's going to be 10 Alabama at 7 Penn State. And it's going to be 9 Notre Dame at 8 Texas.
Okay. My top 12 teams, I'll just roll through them real quickly. Oregon at 1, Ohio State at 2, Texas at 3, Penn State at 4, Tennessee at 5, Indiana at 6, BYU at 7, Notre Dame at 8, Alabama at 9, Ole Miss at 10, SMU at 11, Boise State at 12. That's my top 12 right there. On the bracket front, Oregon at 1, Tennessee at 2, BYU 3, SMU 4. Right now, the conference leaders. Ohio State at 5, so they'd be hosting a playoff game. Texas at 6, Penn State at 7, Indiana at 8, Notre Dame at 9. So Indiana, Notre Dame in a playoff game at Indiana. That could be fun. Alabama at 10, Ole Miss at 11, and Boise State at 12. My bracket part of this as well. So I got Ole Miss jumping in there, baby.
So wait a minute. But you have to have so you don't have an ACC team in your top 12.
Hey, I got SMU.
Oh gosh, yes, thank you. See, man, the SMU being in the ACC, that's going to take me 5 years. I
know.
Continually they must be in the Big 12, eh? Yeah. Well, that's SMU is very interesting, and you can definitely. That's the thing. You could certainly make the case for SMU to be ahead of Miami, and that's probably an issue with my rankings. Is that I have Miami in still, and I have SMU not in the top 12. And obviously, right now, the ACC is getting one. They're getting one team. Just
SMU's your current conference leader. Your current conference leader in the ACC, which is hard to believe, but they're 5-0 in the ACC.
Yeah, and that's the thing too. It's they of course that's BYU's best win is at SMU, and that's a big win.
Yeah.
I was more impressed last week. Like SMU, I had last week in over Alabama. That was right after they hammered Pittsburgh. Now Pittsburgh turns around this week and loses at home to freaking Virginia, and so that's one area where I just like, to me, SMU's value of that win just plummeted,
Yeah.
So there's just so many games that affect all of this, but it's really interesting once you get into you have Texas well above Tennessee. I mean, Texas doesn't have the bad loss. That's the thing. What do you value? Right. Losing to Georgia is not bad. Losing to Arkansas is pretty bad. But I value Tennessee's win over Alabama as opposed to Texas's win over Vanderbilt. And of course, as I say that, Vanderbilt beat Alabama.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you get into transitive football with this stuff, and you can absolutely run yourself into circles.
By the way, I think SMU is going to win the ACC. Like their schedule, they got 3 games left. Their schedule is Boston College at home, on the road at Virginia, and Cal at home. Like I think SMU is going to win the ACC.
Well, they're going to be in the title game, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they're a lock to get in the title game, basically. And then, of course, who's going to win that ACC championship game? Now, I believe, I don't want to talk out of turn. I mean, I know I've never said anything inaccurate in the history of this show, but I believe that does Miami need help to get into the title game now? Am I right with that?
That Clemson is technically ahead of them right now. Yes.
So, yeah. So there you go. So right now, if things stay the same, we're talking about an SMU Clemson title game, which would be, I think, actually I could see that going either way.
I could
certainly could see Clemson ended up with that auto bid, but Miami just getting iced out, man. I mean, Miami at times I feel like has looked good enough to win it with Cam Ward. In certain stretches they played dominant football, but I mean their defense is they play with fire all year long, and also, but it's amazing to think of a team that looks like it could be good enough to win it now facing the prospect of not making a 12 team. And that's where I think Vanini is dead on. Like, there just isn't a dominant team. Is this what it's going to be like moving forward? If so, I'm here for it. I'm not sure that's the case, but right now there just isn't. There's a lot of really good teams in the SEC. There's not one clear dominant team. Maybe Alabama, what we saw the other night, they're about to just go on a tear, right? But there's nobody right now in the entire sport that, to me, you would look at and say, no one's touching that team. And usually we do have a team or two like that.
I'll just wait until Dabo figures out the transfer portal. Once he gets that figured out, Clemson's going to be right back up there, man.
Maybe Dabo, this JUCO thing will get changed, and he'll just, he'll turn into a JUCO pipeline guy. He
called Deshaun Watson back and be like, "Hey, you got any more eligibility? You can come play for us."
I mean, Trevor Lawrence, certainly, I know he has another year. And actually, he was there in COVID. So actually, Trevor Lawrence has 2 more years. Maybe they can change the rules so you can go back from the NFL back to college after you retire from the NFL.
Don't even have to pay him NIL money. He's made enough with Jacksonville, and certainly Deshaun's made enough in Cleveland to last him a lifetime, I would think.
That is true. You would hope so.
615-737-1025, our phone number. We'll get back into the Titans front office conversation coming up next. What does the future look like for Rand Carthon, Chad Brinker, and this front office? Should the Titans consider making a change at the end of the season? We'll get into that. Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3, The Game. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Got some tickets to give away. A pair of tickets to see Daryl Hall at the Ryman Auditorium coming up on Tuesday, November the 19th. Be call number 5-615-737-1025. 615-737-1025. Call number 5 will win a pair of tickets to see Daryl Hall at the Ryman Auditorium coming up on Tuesday, November the 19th. Taking your thoughts on our phone and text lines driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. 615-737-1025. We had a heated, intense discussion earlier in the program about Ray Carthon, Chad Brinker, and the Titans front office, the plan moving forward here. Lots of opinions on kind of both sides of this argument. Has it been enough time? Should the Titans move on? Should the Titans exercise patience as this process goes on with the front office? You know, I brought up the piece from Paul Kuharski and what he wrote after the game on Sunday, and I'll read part of that again for you if you missed it earlier. Quote, players are not performing well enough. Coaches aren't fixing repeat mistakes. The GM who put the team together is outbuilding the fantastic relationships we hear about from his acolytes, but he can't be held to account for his roster because he's invisible. He answered 5 whole questions 2 weeks ago and set off 2 weeks of criticism for his inane responses. The owner hasn't taken a meaningful question from anyone who doesn't get a paycheck from her in years. They'll leave Callahan, as they left Mike Vrabel before him, to answer for everything, whether he deserves to or not, whether it's his to speak about or not. It's such a big mess, and there are so few people involved in it to be confident about. Maybe it's a super slow build and patience pays off, but it's hard to have faith in that. That's what Kuharski wrote after the game on Sunday that saw the Titans drop to 2-7. So, Joe, kind of a back and forth discussion this morning on our show. We had a lot of reaction to it, a lot of participation. We thank you guys as always for that. But I think some people are already out on Rand Carthon, Chad Brinker, the front office. Some people want a clean slate there. Some people think it's insane to think about the idea of moving on from those two this early into the tenure. And this is not going to be a conversation that goes away anytime soon with only having played 9 games so far this season and a 2-7 record to show for it.
Yeah, look, I do think it's at least somewhat insane to consider just starting over again. Just like without looking at, if you take the 30,000-foot view of things, the results this year are not just the results themselves of wins and losses are not terribly different from reasonable expectations. The entire NFL media the last 2 years picked the Titans to be one of the worst teams in the league. Last year we screamed about it, right? You know, like, what are they looking at? And 6-11 isn't quite that bad, but they were way worse than we thought they'd be. Yep. This year, there's always a little more optimism in the hometown as opposed to the league, but still, I think all the mock drafts had the Titans picking in the top 3 or 4, didn't they? Next year in 25, like that's what everybody has expected. So now, again, messaging is part of this. So I get it. I get people being mad at them and even to some extent media. But the results themselves on their face are not like wildly different from what you should have expected. So to me, it's like next year you need to figure a lot of things out. And unfortunately for these guys, like if these results were happening despite Will Levis showing clear progress and you felt like, okay, he's probably going to be your quarterback next year, at least you have that figured out. Okay, well, there's a lot of other things to work on. You can work on them. Yep. The problem for these guys is not only do they have so many holes to fill, and not only have they not done a good enough job, for sure, when you look at the closer view of filling some of these holes, they made some bad decisions. They made some mistakes that are costly, but they probably also have to figure out quarterback. So if they're going to do the rookie thing and they have to win next year, that's not good for them. If they're going to go the veteran route, is there anybody actually good that they can acquire? Who wants to come play for the Tennessee Titans right now? There's a lot of, the trend is alarming and it's not headed to a good place. I personally do think it's somewhat insane to think about firing them this year. I mean, I really do.
Is that purely though just because of the way it's played out in this organization?
I mean, it's partially I mean, it's partially because it is absolutely a public acknowledgement that you are clueless, right? So,
Yeah.
so I think it would be insane from that standpoint after what Amy Adams Strunk has done. But again, also, I think it's insane because I can't for the life of me believe that Amy Adams Strunk didn't do any kind of a good job of vetting these people, doesn't do a good job of communicating with them now. Listen, I will give her credit. If she did all that and she has now come to this realization that Stilly wants her to come to, that they're just clueless and incompetent. And then, hey, then like you said earlier, if you believe that, like there's no hope, these guys don't know what they're doing. Okay, well then it is your responsibility to do that.
Yeah.
But I think that this is where I think some leaps are being made in terms of the results are bad, so they must be idiots, right? I am not there.
Here's the bottom line. Like if it goes that way, and look, I think I'm a little bit more open-minded to moving on from the front office after this year than most people are, and that's fine. But if it goes that way, what you just said is exactly right. You are acknowledging that you made a tremendous mistake in hiring these two to begin with. And not only that, Joe, you're not only acknowledging that you're making a mistake, but you then have to turn around and do it again. And what's the confidence level if you're a Titans fan? Oh, I know that it didn't go well last time, but this time Amy will get it figured out. Like I know you can't operate that way, and eventually, whether it's now, 2 years from now, 5 years from now, whenever it is, she's going to make another hire at general manager. She's going to make another hire at head coach at some point. So I know that's going to happen. But I'm just saying, like, it's not a great place to be as a franchise, and certainly not as a Titans fan if you get to the end of another general manager, and we'll see if they can find lightning in a bottle this time. Like, it's not a great spot to be in.
No, look, I mean, if she were to fire these people, which again, I'm still around 2%, but if that were to happen, I understand that some people would have that rush of dopamine, and get all excited, and then you should have zero hope that there will be a good hire made after that. Zero. Like, why? How could you possibly have a shred of confidence in her to get anything right? So, but you'd get that rush at first, though.
Well, you would. I mean, some people just won't change, and I get that. I do think, I think you can go too far the other way too, and I think we've seen some of that today. Like people talking about you got to give them 4 years, or there's got to be patience involved. And I agree. Like patience is a good thing to have, generally speaking. There also have to be some things along the way that validate that patience. And quite frankly, I don't think we've seen enough of that. I don't think there's been enough that's gone well. I don't think there's been enough that they've hit on that's right to really extend or give them the benefit of the doubt when it comes to patience. So I think that's part of the pickle you find yourself in here if you're Amy Adams Strunk. A lot of it's gone really poorly. And you can blame most of that on the last administration if you want to, and maybe that's what they do. But it's not like we don't see people come in bad situations and turn things around pretty quickly. We saw it with John Robinson here locally with the team. It does happen, and it doesn't happen all the time, but there should be more to show for some of the money that they've spent, some of the decisions they've made than 2-7 to this point.
Yes, for sure. Now that it's inevitable to make comparisons. So I go back to John Robinson. He did in his first year what Rand Carthon could not do this last offseason. He fixed the offensive line.
Correct.
They both did the same thing, which is add a veteran center and draft a tackle high in the draft. The difference is that Robinson had a pre-existing left tackle who was a Pro Bowl level player. So he was able to go right tackle center, and all of a sudden everything changed. Also, huge difference is that Rip Mariota, if you will, and I know you enjoy doing that.
I do.
But the bottom line is Mariota is miles beyond what Will Levis is right now as a quarterback. And in 2016, with that offensive line, with Malarkey's, smash mouth fancy Smash Mouth, whatever that. What the heck was
The
that called?
exotic Smash Mouth.
Thank you. My God, the dementia is killing me today. You know, with that, with Henry and Murray at running back, all the Mariota had his best year as a pro. Mariota after 2016 clearly was going to be the guy moving forward. It was all about giving him a receiver after that, right?
Yep.
He was clearly the guy. We know what happened after that, but the quarterback quality vastly different. Okay, and again, having that left tackle in place, whereas these guys had this situation which was worse. Texter says, Joe, what have they done to prove to you they know what they're doing? Any of them? Well, again, I don't think every choice they've made is bad. Where it really gets hazy is, I'm with you, Robby. I 100% agree. This is Rand's second year, right?
Yeah.
And that's what it is. And he drafted Levis. This front office drafted Levis. But Ryan Cowden was heavily involved in that draft. Someone pointed out on the text line, they had Bonnie Austin for it too, who, by the way, is doing pretty well with the Cardinals right now as GM. It was a different setup. I mean, it's just, and this is where Amy, again, keeps doing, okay, I'm firing you. You come in and work with them. Oh, no, I'm firing him. You come in and work with him. And it's just, it makes it harder to evaluate things. It just, if you're being real, it makes it hard to evaluate things. So I keep coming back to Amy has screwed up so many things that it makes it hard to evaluate. And when they don't talk publicly, just like Kaharski said, she won't, Rand won't, other than a quick conversation with Suss. Callahan has to answer for everything.
Yeah.
That's a problem too. So you better hope that at least Amy is talking with these people and has any idea of what their plan is and how far off their plan they are right now because of their own mistakes.
615-737-1025. More on the Titans front office coming up next. You're listening to Robby and Rexrode, 1025-1063, The Game. Welcome back in. Final segment of the day. Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Talking Titans and the front office. Taking your thoughts. 615-737-1025. Our phone number. 615-737-1025. Robby Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Nick Keys are here with you. We are live from our Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios. Home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership, where the buzz is always about great service. I got one texter, Joe, that says, I don't disagree with any of the concerns about the front office, but I've watched too many games where the team starts out well, scores first, and then after the other team makes their adjustments, the Titans can't seem to respond, and they get shut out at the end of the game. That's a coaching issue. This is from an unnamed texter on the text line talking about the front office discussion. What do you make of that?
Sure. Look, it's not like the coaching's been stellar. I don't think anybody would argue that.
No.
Has the coaching been fireable? I'm talking head coach.
Head coach, no. Special teams coach, yes.
Right. And look, I mean, I think OC is going to need a long look here as well. So, no one is when things have been as bad on as many fronts as they've been bad on with a particular team. I don't think anybody is completely, insulated from blame. It's like, I mean, Brian Callahan came in, he inherited Will Levis. He expressed a ton of optimism about Will Levis. I think Brian Callahan could have had another job. I think Brian Callahan, he was one of the top names in this cycle, probably right after Ben Johnson. I mean, he was right there, right? I mean, Slowick now, some people are down on Slowick all of a sudden. I mean, Slowick maybe should have taken a job last year, but he could have got another job. He came, he liked Levis. It hasn't worked out. And that's how much of that do you put on him? How much is that him coming out on Sundays and being like, how is this kid not playing like he practices? What is going on? And how much is it that he misevaluated him, or are they doing a good enough job of developing him? I don't know. But coaching is certainly part of the issue. It's just, I think the bigger part of the issue with the Tennessee Titans, and I said it last year too, when people wanted to fire Vrabel and got their way, is that the roster is not good enough. It has a lot of holes. They had a lot of work to do with this front office to try to fill the holes. They have not done a good enough job so far of doing that.
Let's go to our 102.5 The Game phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Welcome in, Trey. Trey, good morning. Thanks for calling in.
Good morning, guys. How y'all doing today?
We're good, man.
Good.
Hey, I wanted to know what are y'all opinion about the Titans going out, buying players that's hurt all the time, getting in the draft, finding players with bad backs and all that. They can't see that these players are hurt, that they can't play first in the first game. And how do y'all feel about them going for players like that? Thank you.
Thanks for the call, Trey. Appreciate it. Well, we've talked about that a lot, and that dates back through a couple of different things. I think they got John Robinson in trouble at times, right, Joe? Obviously with Caleb Farley, that did not work out well. Julio Jones, I'm with you totally. Like, I would have made the move, but in retrospect, maybe the end of his time in Atlanta was kind of the signal that the career was starting on a downturn. With Carthon and Brinker in this front office, really that comes down to Snead for me, right? Snead was the one guy that you decided to go get where there were concerns about the knee, and you got him for a third-round pick. You extended him, paid the contract when it was reported that other teams were scared off by what they saw. And I think you saw that reflected in the price for L'Jarius Sneed and what it took to go get him. So L'Jarius Sneed and how he works out from here, I think it's a big part of this discussion too, when it relates to the front office moving forward.
Huge part of it. Yeah. I mean, the caller, the point, I think John Robinson, I think that getting Jeffrey Simmons for pennies on the dollar like he did, Simmons tore his ACL in the draft process, and he would have gone higher in the draft, and the Titans, of course, hit a home run with that. And I think maybe that emboldened him a little bit too much. And the Caleb Farley one was obviously the big one, the huge mistake. He had other acquisitions. Bud Dupree paid him big money coming off his ACL, and basically
great
everything. Yeah, that's true. I guess you got to wait a few years.
Yeah.
But, just about everything after Simmons didn't work out. And, of course, the Titans ended up being the most injured team in the league. And I still argue that was more about player vetting than it was about anything else. So I don't know that that's a huge issue now. But like you said, Snead is a huge part of – because with Snead, you've given up some of your future to get him to have him now. And then what is the plan? Justin from Greenbrier, and I think this is fair, says it just seems they didn't have a clear plan. They threw money at the problem, overpaid for names that haven't produced. Quarterback play is what it is, but they also didn't get a real backup. I would disagree with that. I think the backup's fine. Offensive line is Swiss cheese, et cetera, et cetera. Right. I mean, they have definitely had this. It's like both ways approach at times. Are you building for the future, or are you building for now? I never had a problem spending money to get Ridley and Cushenberry and as many good players as you can, because you want to be good. You should be in the NFL a playoff contender pretty darn quickly, and you want to give Lil Levis the best possible chance.
No doubt about it. Fun show today. Really appreciate the participation from you guys on our text line, on the YouTube chat. We'll be back at it tomorrow. Paul Kuharski will be with us tomorrow on the program as well. That does it for us today. Hope everybody has a fabulous rest of their Tuesday. Jason Big Joe coming up next. You're listening to 102.5, 106.3 The Game.